Good morning, everyone. My name is Mélissa Villella. I'm an associate prof at Université at Abitibi and associate prof, auxiliary prof at the University of Ottawa. And
I'm Julie Corrigan. I'm an associate prof at Concordia University, and in relation to today's talk, I also have children in the Riverside School Board, and whom I've discovered by accident are members of a CLC school, which I had no idea what that was until I started doing this research. So apparently we're a CLC school, so I have a personal investment in this. Yeah.
And I'm a former school principal and a founding principal of a community citizenship school. It's similar but different from the CLC model. And I worked for Western Quebec at one point because I was curious. I was in the Francophone system in Ontario and wanted to see what the minority system was because literature was those certain things. And then we didn't quite know. I wanted to see for myself if it's really what I felt it was, because I've always lived on a bilingual, plurilingual, and pluricultural border. And so today, I was approached by the Ministry of Education to do a project on the CLCs, the extended model, and we'll explain what the extended model is in relation to vitality. But when we started talking about vitality, I said, wait a second, we're talking about schools. So we need to put vitality and look at it in terms of the policies we have in education and the link that vitality has with educational success. And in terms of the policies, you'll see that there's a link between the two.
Can I also ask, do people in this room know what CLCs are? Because I didn't, does anyone not know? Don't be shocked. Do you not know? Wait, I'm giving thumbs up to the tech guy at the back who helped us. Okay, sorry. Anyone not know what they are? Please be honest. Okay, I think this is important because not everyone knows what these are. Okay, great. Yeah.
So today we've got the outline, which is our regular outlines when we do presentations. We've talked a little bit about our background, but we'll talk about the background of the study. The problem we looked at all the way down to the different concepts and the recommendations. The report is larger and it's quite large. There is a summary, and so if people are interested at the end, you're welcome to have a copy of the report. It is now available to everyone. So we were approached, as I was saying, by the ministry to do a study on community learning centers, which according to Lamar are an approach to the way schools and communities work together, to summarize it quickly. And in our study, we show that it's not only an approach, but also a structure that supports the approach that's taken towards school community relations. And so when we proposed a return educational success, we had said it's happening in settings, and when we're looking at ethno-linguistic vitality, we're looking at the part that has to do with being an official language minority and how English speakers sit in that space, and also what partners are doing in that space. So the community learning centers, traditionally with Lamar's research, shows that there have been three models. The single site where you've got one school, one vision, and one CDA, community development officer that works with the school principal and the staff to create these community partnerships, school community partnerships, to contribute to vitality and whatnot. There's the multi-site where they would have two schools and they would share the vision and the plans, etc. But we were asked to look at the extended model. And the extended model is where they have three or more schools that are working usually within the same region, but not always. And they're serving the same community with one plan, with vision and sharing strategies. Over time, what has happened is that the multi-site, people talk less about it, and they've been considered part of the extended model. So if you hear that we're saying there are 3 sites and then you hear somewhere that there are 2, it's because there's been an evolution in the discourse. But according to the research and the historical positioning of what we're doing, there's been this multi-site model still does exist. So given that English-speaking Quebecers is an integral part of Canada's history and heritage, which is part of vitality as well, and that there's inequitable access to programs and services in English within various communities, and that there are educational language rights. We heard yesterday when Mr. Ortega?
Yes,
Ortega was talking about rights. And we were looking at the various social impacts and economic impacts that are going on with like English language education and on the community as a whole. We came up with various questions that brought us to do a lit review, where we will often hear that in the political discourse, that English speaking communities are not disadvantaged, or they're, you know, all that. And when we started looking at the data, not only do we see that proportionally for the portion of the population that we have in Quebec, but we represent 14.9%. But when we look at the unemployment rates, the lone family rates, the annual income under 20,000, we can see that we are in a minoritized situation. Not only that, we will see a little bit later in the data that there's also a link with the employment situation of Anglophones in Quebec. But also when we were looking at the overall underprivileged index of all schools, we could see that in communities, even where there were underprivileged schools that were Francophone schools, the Anglophone schools were more underprivileged than the Francophone schools. And people forget that part. And so that was important for us to put it in the document. When we were looking at different communities and different literature that was available, we noticed that there's a high degree of ethnic and religious diversity that we can even note back within the English speaking community back to even 2008. Also note that Quebec has the second largest Black population in Canada. And in the statistics that came out from the CHSSN, to keep in mind that our Black English speaking Quebecers, both born inside and outside of Canada, are more marginalized on various fronts than non-speaking non-English speaking Quebecers, as well as Black and non-Black French speaking Quebecers. So to keep in mind that we're to question ourselves and saying, are we within our English speaking community, looking at racialized communities and the inclusion of our racialized communities, are they visible, are they audible? A bit like the presentation we had this morning in what we're doing. We also noticed that there's a disproportionate number of Black English speaking Quebecers, including students that are disadvantaged within the province, which goes along with what we're seeing. So we started talking about a majority community rather than a majority community, or often they'll refer to Francophone Quebecers as a minority, meaning a majority within the province, but a minority within Canada. And we coined on the other side.
This is Melissa's term. This is.
Well, where are we?
But this term is from
But
Mélissa.
we're looking at it as from a majority perspective and saying all the way through Canada, there are even within North America, there is not another English speaking community that is a minority community in its province, for example, on a territory, and a majority elsewhere. So we talked about the majority, and which doesn't take away from the official languages. It's just being precise to say the comparisons, we have to take other things into consideration. So we came up with how and to what extent do extended model CLCs support educational success? And one of the sub questions, because we made the presentation shorter today, was how does it support vitality of our official language minority communities? We had one on partnerships as well. We'll talk about it a bit. But the educational success definition that we used, or the conceptual framework that we used two parts. The ministry, when we had the Liberal government, came out with an educational success policy that had different parts that had to do with infrastructure, partnerships, literacy, preschool education, etc. And then if you are aware of these policies and you work in education, the document has disappeared off their website. Both in French and English.
Vote de rigueur with the current political party. But when we were commissioned to create this questionnaire, we were working with within the current political framework in definition of educational success. So if we were to ask each person in this room, how do you measure educational success? What is that, right? So that's the process I, as the methodologist on the project, had to go through. And of course, this is no longer de rigueur with the CAC party, but here we are, so. Yeah.
However, when we did do it, we also used it to have a longitudinal look at what we're doing. Because we can't say we're looking at it today, but there's been an influence about policy, in line with policy. And we also looked at the strategic plan and the action plans that come in to come up with the framework. So educational success is at the top because that's what you see, right? If it was an iceberg or whatever, that's what you can see at the top. And that there's the link with with the extended models and the vitality and the institutional completedness. So the framework we used for the vitality piece was looking at the government official languages minority community document and the framework checklist that exists to make sure that we were in line and choosing to analyze our data in line with what the ministry was saying. However, we didn't limit ourselves to that because when we talked to Vitality, the latest research is talking about history and heritage. So when we looked at the Vitality data, we have those pieces, but the history and heritage piece wasn't coming out as much as it did in other parts. And that's part of the analysis of Vitality. If we want to know where we're going, we need to know where we've come from. And then I pass it off to Julie for
Okay.
methodology.
Right, so to give you a sense of the participants in our study, we had a pretty nice cross-section of teachers, administrators, and some parents, and within our framework, there were 71 participants in total. We would have liked to have more, but we'll tell you some of the limitations of our study. Essentially, we emailed all the extended model CLCs and invited everyone involved in them to complete the questionnaire. But as you know, you often get links to questionnaires which you never open and never complete. So we have the sample that we have. And we used descriptive statistics to analyze the data. We used a mixed methods approach, meaning that we triangulated the data with qualitative data from interviews. And those were those who agreed to be interviewed. We had 12 in total. It was a nested sample, meaning that those 12 people were within our larger sample of 71. And we used thematic analysis to analyze the data from our qualitative sample. Okay, so just quickly, I'm not gonna bore you. I'm a methods nerd. I teach research methods at Concordia. I could go on for days, but I won't. As I mentioned earlier, if I asked each person in this room, what do we mean by educational success, or, what do we mean by vitality? You would all give me something different, but as a methodologist creating a questionnaire, we have to get that from somewhere. As Mélissa alluded to earlier, pointing out the documents from which we derived these constructs, what we call measurement constructs. And since we were working with the CLCs, we used the learn mission statement to define what it was that the CLCs are doing. So you can see the definition from learn here. And then, when we talk about student achievement, okay, so we're getting this from the document on educational success and contributing to the vitality of Quebec's English-speaking minority language community. So we're measuring vitality. So what we were in essence doing is measuring to what extent the CLCs, the community learning centers, are indeed accomplishing what they set out to do. Okay, so we had to operationalize this. When you have a questionnaire, you ask multiple questions about each of the constructs we're measuring. And as Mélissa already said, we're focusing on vitality today because we don't have time to go into all of our data. But the items from vitality, as Mélissa already pointed out, came from the framework for the vitality of official language minority communities and with current research as well. So they were pilot tested. We had open-ended questions. We tested our scales. Ask me more about the methodology for all of those who want to geek out after. Although we were working with an English-speaking community, as we know, we have a number of Francophones who work in our community. So we had those translated and adapted in French. Okay, and we also developed our interview protocol, and these were the questions that we were considering with regards to vitality and the questions that we put forth during the collection of qualitative data. And just to move along, our participants, this is roughly corresponds with the size of these school boards. So, we have some smaller and larger school boards. So while this wasn't, we didn't use random sampling techniques or cross-sectional techniques, these do more or less correspond in many ways with the size of the school boards that were involved in this study. In the roles, you can see the number of people who responded. So we had governing board members, CDAs, CLC board school board representatives, and so forth. Just in here, I really want to make time, allow Mélissa time for the recommendations that came from this, but just to give you a sense of who our participants were. You can see the whole report later, so if you want to spend more time with this, that's great. I'm gonna move it along so we can get to. I believe we're just gonna move right along, so you have time for recommendations.
Yeah. So we did do, she did the quantitative part and we did the qualitative part. The reason we do both is because when we come up with anecdotes, people always, or with qualitative research and it's a tough topic, they'll often say, oh, it's not important. And Sharma, a researcher, says you need both, you need the head and the heart. So the heart is what's speaking to you and the head is usually what the data is saying. So we did the codes. And so to get to the question, so if you're looking at, we look at we put the 3 scores up so you could see it. So when we looked at the links, we see that the CLCs are helping with institutional completedness, so partnerships. And that was a really strong point. And almost just as strong was vitality, that there were certain elements that needed to be worked on. But the link to educational success is an element of where there's a continuous improvement work that needs to be done. So more specific to the school plans.
If you can't read that, by the way, the questionnaire is a 4-point scale. So 4 is, I strongly disagree, 3 being I agree. So when we are seeing scores in the 3s, we're in between agree and strongly agree. Okay, so you get a sense of but educational success, things like the literacy programs, that's a very middling score. We're not doing so hot there, just to give you a picture of that, yeah.
So what does that look like when we did the analysis? We'll look at the vitality part. There's a really good sense of belonging with the CLCs to not only the English community, but the wider community. What was interesting in the study that's not showing up in the research that's done is that the belonging is to the local community rather than to Quebec as a whole or Canada as a whole. And so when we had written the question up, we said, do you feel that you're, and people are like, and you'll see the comments shortly. The other thing is it gave people opportunities that they may not have had because they may not have had links with different areas. Inclusion, there was an inclusion section. Keeping in mind, one of the parts Julie went over is we had mostly white women that were answering the data who felt that there was inclusion. And then yet we have the information on different communities and the Black community in particular, and not seeing that piece in the data. So we have a perception piece that we think we're being inclusive, and yet the data across the province is maybe saying something else. The mobilization piece, we're working quite well on it. And then you'll see, like Julie said, the job readiness, the numeracy, et cetera, which is part of the educational success. The scores are more on, we need to create better links. Doesn't mean it's not there, just means that it's not across the board at the same level. So the evidence from the quotes that we're showing you today, so there's a positive view of bilingualism and belonging. So in the data, the latest report from the Commissioner of Official Languages was saying over 71% of English-speaking Quebecers are bilingual. And we made sure to put that in the report as well. But when they were talking about bilingualism, they would point out and say in the interviews, we're not just doing partnerships with the English-speaking community, we're doing it with the Francophone community. And that's part of the framework, to be able to work with the majority that's there and to overall bilingual, and they would give different forms of bilingualism. It could be parallel bilingualism. It could have one activity after another. It could be just a Francophone activity. It could be just an Anglophone activity, but that the bilingualism was present, whether in a formal or informal fashion. And then people were talking about, I thought this was interesting, the political climate and how the political discourse is trying to separate, and yet people are trying to work together, attached to that framework. Belonging to the local community, and that's an example. When I look at Quebec, I would say a sense of belonging to the school, the local community area, and we link that back to the CLCs. And people were talking about the MRCs as well, the importance of the MRCs. Youth development, people would talk about robotics, girls who game, so they had a link with different, I believe that's a university program that's attached. I think with McGill, if my memory is, it serves me right. And so we could see that there were different youth development leadership initiatives. So in terms of continuous improvement, people were talking about better promoting, as Julie had mentioned, even as a parent, who sent her kids to a robotics program at one
Yeah.
point in the school, was not even aware, and then she said, oh yeah, I saw that sign in the corner.
Yeah.
When I had talked to her about the program. So nothing against where her kids go to school, but that we noticed across the Facebook pages, across different things that were happening, that maybe there needed to be a concerted effort of showcasing what was going on. And that there could be even, and there are some information, like webinars and stuff about the roles and partnerships and how people can buy in. Because people aren't always available to go to things, but sometimes they'll listen to a podcast on the way home. The recommendations, we had some even from the ministry, and the ministry, it was interesting, said, oh, you have some for us too? I said, yes, of course. So the collaboration was to have a survey template that school boards could use to and to develop it with the partners. To gather feedback from students and families. The school boards to define harmonized expectations for the promotions of activities. Or at least for the CLC that was involved. The school board reps, we had in previous data, I believe it was up to 6 people, six schools that could be attached to a CLC. A 1.0 means a full-time position. And most of them are in about 25-hour positions, if my memory serves me correctly. So to make sure that the ratio of schools comes down, not only comes down, but in one RMC when possible, because the CDA has to create double partnerships. And so to keep that in mind and to take that into consideration, encourage student-led and staff-led supported activities. We heard a lot about what the CDAs are doing, but it's a team effort. So we talked about the importance of listening to the students, asking what the students want as well, the staff, as well as what the CDA is doing, but to make sure their senior-led spaces and preschool spaces, to make sure that the communities can come into the school. Because as a former principal, I know that when they attach to the local Anglophone school and Francophone minority situations, they stay attached to the English language school. And so we were hearing the same thing on the Anglophone side, so to make sure. And the senior-led activities show the kids that they can grow older and stay in their communities. And that's why we're talking about having the senior space there, which was often there. School principals to monitor that the specific cross-curricular competencies are closely linked to the school's educational project. So when they're choosing activities, it's not just, yay, you can offer a service to our school, but is it really answering a need that we have presently? Or should it be at a different time to make sure that we bring the educational success link up? And other school staff to reach out for partnership ideas. It's not that the CDA is going to learn the curriculum, but there are large guidelines that they can, even with the new curriculum that had to do with culture, different connections, broad, I would say broad strokes that they can attach and create partnerships with. So at least it gives them guidelines. And then in the conclusion, we know that the extended model CLC contributes in important ways to the vitality of the English-speaking communities, especially for the sense of belonging of students and for the rest of the community as well. But that there are more concerted efforts for the showcasing and that the vitality and the partnerships, as you can see, almost go hand in hand. And the CDAs are an integral component because the principal and the staff can't do it all. And understanding how to create those networks. As a former principal of a similar model, I did it. And then I would train staff, except it can lead to burnout. And so you don't want to make sure we've already known the data that we lose a lot of the CDAs along the way for a variety of reasons, pay, and different things, conditions, work conditions, better jobs in their area. And from our data, we know that our CDAs are highly qualified. So they have master's degrees, they have bachelor degrees. And then that brings us to the limitations. We had a teacher strike in the middle of this, so that affected our data. We do have some teacher voice, but we had hoped for more teacher voice. We had one model only, so we can't tell you if this model is better than another. That would be another study. No student voice other than we offered it to the adult ed, but we didn't have anyone answer. I don't think so. And then little parent voice, governing council, we did have some, but that's why we mentioned to the MEP that the template to have feedback and regular feedback about the CLCs would be an important component. And now, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, today or another day, you have our email addresses and we're here to listen to your questions and answer them.
10 minutes for questions. That was very good. That's okay.
Hi, I just have a question, I'm just curious, one of the things I don't know if it's possible to access from MQ is kind of like the dropout rates and retention and, you know, tracking students' performance within schools. Were you able to do any of that comparative? Because for us as CLCs, it'd be nice to be able to show that impact comparing that type of data, but I've never heard of any permission being given. Because I know that when I go to the IMD sessions, they show a chart of similar values, similar success, but there's a mystery curtain of like, which discriminatory schools there are that they're not willing to disclose.
Yeah.
You know anything about that?
We didn't have data on that. So the student achievement part, we looked at education success from like a very large perspective. The way the policy documents were, that whole student achievement piece would be kind of like a longitudinal study. You'd have to see how long the CLC has existed, what changes have been made, and how the data, and then Julie as a methodologist would go in to see how we would create those
But
links.
it's more
to
about
perhaps
permission, the permission to access that data, or.
I think what you're saying is you don't know why are students dropping out of school? Is this what I'm hearing? Is
What's
this?
the data, it's the access to the
Is there
data.
an impact from what's
Oh,
going
did
on
the
in the
CLC
CLC school?
impact-
Is it impacting things like dropout rates?
I mean,
Retention?
that's a very interesting study and a completely different study.
Yeah.
It would be. I mean, I could think of a lot of experimental designs or anyhow research designs that could look at that, but when we talk about educational success, we were asking adults in the extended model CLCs to comment on things that were defined by ministry policy documents that as they defined educational success. So to what extent do the extended model CLCs contribute to early childhood literacy? Like these were the types of questions. To what extent do they contribute to learning French or you know, and then it was a survey. So we didn't have
Right,
data.
and my question was, because since you're hired by the NUQ, maybe you had access to data from the inside.
No.
No, we didn't have
Yeah.
access to that data.
No. That would be interesting.
Yes.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm wondering about, so as someone in education, the statistics on the 0 to 4 kind of rating scale, were you able to, so what do I want to know? I want to know if there's sort of best practice anywhere, like, did you see the educational levels go up in a particular region? Because you mentioned that you had kind of representation from all school board regions, and I'm curious if, say, numeracy was higher in Western School Board than LB, you know, like, were you able to go back and say, they have a really high level in that area, we should be.
We would be able to tell them, but we weren't asked to say that.
Yeah.
And it could be, it would be something that, well, perhaps you.
So we were asked for an overall
Right,
study,
Yeah, we weren't.
and we
yeah.
weren't
Not
asked
a
to do case,
comparative.
we were asked to do case studies.
Okay.
In the past, Learn has had reports done, and that they did have case studies done by schools.
Yeah.
That we had looked at, but for us, what they asked for was a snapshot
Right,
of what was happening
High
right now.
level.
right.
Yeah, so that would be, we have the data. to
Yeah, that would
able
be
to do
very
that,
interesting.
But we have not, that wasn't attached to this part specifically, but thank you so much.
When you're a researcher, you have a research question. You
For
think
sure.
there's a research
Yeah, for
question.
sure.
There are.
But the data
dozens
is
of
still
questions
there,
We could have asked.
so,
Right.
okay.
And but we don't want to perhaps you know, we don't want to pit CLCs against one another and, you know, say, oh, you're doing really well and your CLC is not, you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
would be something privately that potentially could be shared or.
Or it's not like to compare.
Yeah,
each other.
yeah.
Well, it wouldn't be a
Yeah.
comparison, it would be a supporting, I mean, this is like the flaw in the thinking.
Well, because one of the things I've heard principals sort of interject is just, like, let's say the school board prioritizes numerically, you know, math skills or literacy, and so as a school board, they're focusing on that. They see the math scores and everything increase, and then they shift what their educational success plans are based on that. Was that part of something you took in?
So what has happened so far is that we presented to Abby, so the Council for English Education. Thank you, the advisory board. And then we presented to the DGs, we presented to the school board reps, to the school principals. And what we're seeing is that the DGs have put a committee together to see where they're going with the report. And what we're getting back from even, if I could even learn as an example, because there was a PRT section as well, we put in certain things and Danielle actually sent me emails saying, oh, look what we're doing.
Oh, right.
Right, remember the stuff that was attached, so we're finding that the more we've talked about the study, the more people are going, so instead of giving what people usually traditionally do in education, and I'll talk about education, right?
Yeah.
They'll give like 15 recommendations, but they're really broad stroke recommendations. We did 3 columns, we had vitality ones, and those are only one example, we probably have 3, 5, 7 depending. But they would have very specific things in terms of recommendations that were also actionable items. And so, for example, at one point, if we talk about the CDAs and we're talking about the partnerships, and because of things that came out more than once, school principals were forgetting to give keys and key cards and even having the CDAs on the fire plan. So when everything blows up in a school, because it's not if, it's when, it always happens that way, right? Former school principal talking, I was saying, we're better off prepared. They didn't have access to do things and to be able to continue activities after a fire alarm went off or whatever. So we put a lot of those elements into the plan that came from people from the inside who are telling us, and also an adult point of view, right, for the most part, of what makes things better and what things to be adding as well. I saw that you had your hand up and I'll go to the back afterwards. Yes.
Thank you. You had the data on French literacy. Did you ask questions about French teaching and learning in the schools?
So there were questionnaire items about to what extent, the question from my memory would have been something to the effect of, to what extent do extended model community learning centers support early literacy in French? And then another one, not about early literacy, but literacy in general in French. From my memory, these would have been the types of questions that were asked. So, for example, my kids attended a coding club at St. Lawrence School in Riverside School Board. So, there would have been a question about to what extent do these CLCs support, technology and innovation or something to this effect that is tied to the government at the time's definition with educational success. So it's not like we were looking at students, standardized test scores or anything like this. This was data from adults who were involved in projects with the CLCs. Does that make sense? So there's a lot of data, to answer we don't have those like correlational things, or that it could be interesting, but we don't have this. Yeah. Are we running out of
Time for one additional question.
Okay, can I just add a piece for the French part, just quickly? We would have stuff, people would talk to us through the interviews, and they also had boxes at the end of the interview where if they had open-ended comments that they wanted to share, and often they would have to do with French learning, whether it was a preoccupation that came up or the importance of having it within the CLCs, and people would often mention indirectly in the interviews what the level of immersion was, or French that was taught in the school, or how the activity was integrated
well, and just
in a larger sense.
Just anecdotally as well, my kids went to a coding club at an English school. The whole session was taught in French at lunch hour. So, I mean, they were learning scientific and technological language in French, well, at an English setting. So it's kind of all comes together. Yeah.
And last but not least.
Yeah.
Hi, comment and a question, bit of both. So I would say, like, I'm from Learn. Hi. I've been with CLC initiative for about almost 10 years. And I would say, like, one of the nice things about the initiative is, rarely is there a province-wide focus on something like numeracy, for example. Rather, the goals tend to be defined at the local level, which means that there's huge variance around how much one CLC school is focused on, let's say, vitality outcomes, and how much another is focused on educational outcomes. And that kind of bridges to my question, which is, it has been my experience that the level of engagement from the school team and community partners has a pretty big influence on the focus and outcomes. So I guess I'm wondering, in this study, was there any attention paid to the level of engagement of school teams within the extended models and how that might have influenced or shaped their areas
So,
of focus?
Methodologically, no. I mean, we didn't measure what, like, how do you define engagement, right? So then how would that be measured? As a, so that this was also a very interesting, we could have dozens and you've been all asking very interesting questions. So I think you should ask the ministry and Heritage Canada to give us more money. We can keep doing, we could answer these questions, but we did not measure that. That was not our prerogative. That's, you know.
So often the institutional completed piece, which has to do with partnerships, shows that yes, when there's when there is engagement with the community, that things do have an impact. And if we take where I am in Honda, we have one little English school, and QUESCREN did a wonderful video to explain what the challenges and the opportunities are in that area. So the institutional completedness has a piece. But I would like to get back to the first part of your question. And the first part of your question was about, I just went blank.
Well, engagement and
No, before that, you said something about,
the buy-in of that.
Focus.
We're out of time too. Well, let's continue this conversation. Are we okay?
Well, in respect for the next speaker, maybe we could
Yeah,
have this.
because, you know, in an extended model specifically, you know, if all three principles actually come together, for example, they might define or identify goals that are more related directly to things like educational success outcomes, but often they don't. So it might be like one principle steps forward, and then their goal will be the one that gets prioritized.
and I remember my comment. So because we've linked this to educational success, and we're telling people to look at their plans, like the PRVI in English is the student success.
Commitment to success.
The commitment, thank you, the commitment to success plan. And the link between the commitment to success and the school board, the school education project. And the links with what we're doing, we should see different changes over time if that part is implemented. So right now, yes, the governing board would have a lot of influence in what's going on, but it's going to be up to the school principal and the CLC team to create those links with the educational piece. And I think that's the key part of what our study is saying, is that while we're doing excellent work, we need to have a tighter link to what the educational success and student achievement outcomes need to be for the community. And now I'm done.
Yes.
It's your turn.
Oh, thank you. So you guys are. In fact, I would now like to invite Stephanie Myers to take the stage. Thank you.
Yeah, we can turn those over.
Oh, and now.
Towards the end, towards the end, no,
Towards the end?
I'll cue you.
Okay.
I think so. See if it works.
Hey, looks good.
Do you want more time for questions or for the presentation? Okay, yeah, we're shifting gears quite dramatically from what you guys were doing to what I'm doing, but, so I am Stephanie Myers. I work at John Abbott. I am in the English department in ALC, but what I'm here to talk to you about today, and I don't even know if you saw my name on the sign up, but I'm talking about, youth in care and their access to higher education in Quebec. I'm somebody who worked in alt ed my entire life, designing online courses. I'm from BC. So the care for youth in care in BC is radically different than what it is in Quebec. Radically, we can talk about that for a long time. It's really a model of what should be happening everywhere. Anyway, so that's who I am. So this is what got me started. So in 2022, I saw this stat. Wow is right. That's the entire like Marianopolis population, 30 Abbott, you know, it's a lot of kids. I knew what happened for kids in BC. I was a foster parent. I opened alt schools to get basically transition schools to get students who had left school back in, whether they were, you know, incarcerated or single, you know, parents, young parents, just kids who were bored and dropped out, highly intelligent kids who left the system. So that was sort of my specialty. So I definitely saw a lot of youth in care, and I worked closely with the Ministry of Children and Families, which is what it's called there. But I wanted to know the answer to this question. Where do they go when they age out? So Oh, geez. Careful with your clay. So what does that mean in Quebec? It means that instead of doing things that most 18-year-olds do, get a driver's license, go to CEGEP, go to university, go home to mom and dad and do your laundry and make your dinner so that you can sit at the table and do homework with them. These kids basically navigate the world completely alone at 18 with no financial, no socio-emotional, no familial supports. It's quite sad. So I decided, I went to my dean, who was supposed to be here today, he's retired, maybe he's off enjoying himself, which is awesome. And I said, I need to know where they go and how many are here. I started asking in the college, how many youth in care do we have? Oh, well, how would I find that out? Like, is there a stat for that? Oh, no. And then I realized that we don't track that through my lit review. So he was kind enough to give me a release, never enough release, but I got one. So I felt like that was a win. And so my first thing was to find out about Quebec because I really knew BC well, but I didn't know Quebec. So I looked at over 65 documents, including some really huge ones that we'll talk about in a minute. 45 of the documents were Quebec specific. The Laurent report, which how many people know the Laurent report? All 550 pages of it. And then Goyette's longitudinal study. Do people know that? We're going to talk about that really briefly. And then I looked at comparisons across Canada. I want to know what was happening in every province. So I did that as well. And then some of the things that emerged in the data was this reference to trauma and resilience. And so I spent some time looking at those things too. And then obviously best practice. What could we be doing to better support these youth? So that was where I began. So I'll talk very quickly about the Laurent Commission and the Laurent report. Do people know it? I don't want to waste too much time because I'm under a time limit. But basically it was a document, 2019, a young 7-year-old died in care of her parents with multiple red flags. So a commission was struck with like 11 people. One of them, Leslie Hill, who is now the director of youth protection. So that is good because for the last few things have gone off the rails. So what came out of that was a 550-page report. They interviewed and had forums with stakeholders, with all kinds of people, and then produced this document along with the shortcomings, which interestingly, the overrepresentation of Black youth, Indigenous youth that are in the care of youth protection, to kind of your point of that under overrepresentation. And then they came away with recommend actions, as they were called. I have a very dry mouth, I apologize. So in education was one of them. So anyway, we'll carry on. So since then, things have kind of erupted. I don't know if people are following what's happening with the youth protection system, but the former director was ousted in 2024, October. Leslie Hill stepped in, which is great, because she actually was part of that commission. So the problem was 2 years after they did a study to get feedback from stakeholders, have things gotten better? 86% said they had gotten worse. So Leslie Hill's in there. She's one person. I don't suspect that she's going to change the world, but at least she's actually talking to the youth, which seems to get overlooked. So I have hope for her, and she just put out a report. So she came in October 30th, 2024, and she just released a 1-year report. So I already am happy that she's there. The other major report, if you don't know about this and you care at all about youth in care, I would highly recommend this study. So Goyette works for ENAP. So you guys will be able to know this better. So National School of Public Education, he's the chair in the evaluation of public action towards youth and vulnerable populations. He did a massive longitudinal study on youth in care. To date, it's the biggest one in Canada ever done. He started with like 2,000 youth from 2014, 2019. He still talks to them because they formed their own collective. So he got data from their educational, their health. He pulled a lot of data, quantitative data, but he also did 2 interviews between 2014 and 2019, looking at career path, employment, housing, stability, mental health, etc. So it gets referred to constantly. Many papers have been published from his report, and they continue to go back. So there's a lot of information to be gleaned from him, along with many others. I don't want to leave out Vardaman Vetter, for people who are from Concordia, has done incredible work. Who else am I forgetting? At McGill,
Tony
no,
Esposito.
Oh, yeah, he actually is in the most recent, 2025, they just let out, they just published just a week ago of their most recent, and Esposito is on that. I'm trying to remember her name, she's in care, she was former youth in care. Yeah, just, thank you, she's amazing and prolific in her writing and really powerful in what she's doing at McGill. So what does the research say about Quebec's youth in care experience and education? This is gonna be depressing, so get ready. By age 17, 74% of youth with in-care experience have repeated at least one grade, compared to 20% of kids who like live at home. 37% of youth in care obtain their high school diploma, like ever, compared to 86% of their peers living at home. By 21, 1/3 of youth in care are neither in work, education, training. Where are they? What are they doing? And then those youth who do succeed in obtaining post-secondary education are working in predominantly specialized skilled care fields, home workers, that kind of thing, right? Overworked and underpaid professions. So. What do they say about youth in care with mental health and homelessness? And I think it's really important as educator, which is my role, but to not disregard this because we know that the homelessness and the mental health are huge. So we need to take these into considerations if we're going to welcome them into our schools. So 50% of youth identify as having mental health issues. There's a scale of level of mental health, obviously higher than the rest of the population. 25% of youth in care reported at least one suicide attempt. That was higher in my study, which we'll get to in a second. 50% reported at least one episode of homelessness. Average number of episodes of homelessness, 4. And that's between the ages of 18 and 23. So that's basically homeless almost once a year. And there's a real epidemic of this hidden homelessness. So it's not really being tracked because they're sleeping on a couch. So, you know, oh, they're not really homeless. You know, they're sleeping on a couch. So that's not homelessness. It is, they do not have a home. So yeah. All right, common recommendations. So this is some good things. So they suggested tutoring for the young kids in school, mentorship for older kids, and Berkey had talked about that in his opening. Youth access to educational services. I'm going to talk more about that, including complete curriculum of this Quebec school program, increased psychosocial supports. Nothing new. Obviously, you don't have well-being. You're not going to be able to focus on school. Need for placement settings to transform culture to prioritize education instead of rehabilitation. We're going to talk more about that. This idea that you are flawed and you need to be fixed, as opposed to shifting the focus to an educational focus. Ensuring networks work together. This is a big thing. If we don't know each other, how can we hand these kids off? Sustained supports for youth aging out of care, raising it from the recommendations in various places were anywhere from 21 to 25. In BC, it's now up to 27. So you can get support, free education, free mental health, dental, a mentor, I'm forgetting many things, housing, obviously number 1, until you are hitting 28. Yeah, and as a former foster parent in BC, who my former foster daughter is now 32, she took advantage of that and is successful. Yeah, so my research report, enough about the old stuff. Okay, these are my guiding questions. So I focused specifically, I targeted youth who had been successful in CEGEP and beyond, because I wanted to work backwards. I want to say, what was the garbage you faced and how did you handle it? And what do you wish was different so nobody else has to go through what you went through? So that was kind of my approach to it. So what were your barriers? What were the interventions that you accessed, supports you accessed, or wished you had to be able to be successful in CEGEP or beyond? So the foundations of my research was really around student agency or human agency. It just so happened that when I was starting to do my lit review, I came across this person called Bianca Boyer Delicio. She now works for Indigenous Affairs Canada, but she wrote this paper called Better Supporting Youth Aging Out of Foster Care in Quebec specifically, even though she was at the University of Ottawa. I still haven't talked to her. I tried to track her down. I haven't got her yet. But because she was in social work, she used the life course model, which I thought was very interesting. We talk a lot about kids needing to have grit and needing to have resilience. You know, we just need to teach them, dig in. And the problem with that is it doesn't take into consideration the outside. So it's all fine and good for me to have grit, but if I don't have access, it really doesn't matter. And so that led me to Kundu, who I was reading over the summer for fun, had nothing to do with my intention of doing this research. But he talks about student agency as accounts for both the control that an individual has over a situation and the structural forces that shape a person's access and ability to leverage opportunity. And to me, youth in care, this is huge. Many of them have grit. Many of them are resilient. I would argue that all of them are resilient, just to simply have gone through what they went through. So I was really interested in this idea of creating agency and like, how do we do that and hold the structures to be accountable? Because right now they're really not. So these were my participants. I had 10 participants. I wanted 10 to 15. Try to find youth in care that have been successful in CEGEP. Good luck. There's no tracking. There's nothing. So it's a lot of word of mouth. It's a lot of going to other associations to try to find these youth. So I had 10 youth participants, self-identifying, English, 9 English, 1 French, Francophone, 5 white, 2 biracial, 2 Black, 1 Indigenous, ages between 18 and 34, gender identity male, 2 male, which is very typical when we're trying to get people to participate. Women participate more than men, 70%, 20%, and 1 transgendered youth. These are the levels they attained, so I thought it was very representative. So 1 was in their first year of CEGEP, but very successful. Second year CEGEP, I had 2. Third year, I had 1. 4 had graduated CEGEP. 2 were attending university, and actually during the time of my study, 1 more was accepted to university and 1 had applied. So anyway, I thought we had a nice representation across a pretty broad period of time. I don't want to talk too much about the research. I did interviews. So I interviewed them all. We recorded them. We transcribed them. I used the Sharma's kind of constructivist qualitative approach so that their words would become the foundation of the coding. And so that was really important to me. So the focus areas of the questions were around identity, self-efficacy, family, perceived support, schooling, education, and daily life were kind of the topic areas that I asked them questions about. But it was very much like Kundu. It was very intentionally conversational to get them to feel comfortable and give me the info. So here's the big one. What did I find out? That society's misperception about youth in care is hugely impactful to what they do in the future. If you are told you are garbage, how much do you want to go there? And every single one of them, well, one was there because of legal issues, found himself in some trouble, and so actually entered into the system because of some poor choices, let's call them that, as Berkey would say. The rest of them were there because of their parents. These kids are not in care because they're bad kids, because they're troubled kids, because they are delinquent kids. I hear that one a lot. We got them in our school. Do we have to worry like that they'll steal from one of those? This is a question I just got recently. So reports. This is a recent, like the current report that just came out a couple of weeks ago about youth in care at Batshaw. So this is the distribution of how they come into care. Why are they there? When you look at the #1 reason, exposure to conjugal violence, they're noting that it's 127% rise from last year to this year in why kids are in care. It's conjugal violence. I don't know what that means, but I think it's interesting and I think it deserves a closer look. Risk of physical abuse, risk of neglect, psychological mistreatment, sexual abuse, which were things that had been the case for every single person that I interviewed in multiple forms, not just one, but multiple. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind. These kids are not there because of themselves. They're there because of familial situations. And I think sometimes we forget that. Overdiagnosis of ADHD and undiagnosed trauma. This is huge. And as somebody who worked in alt ed, I see it a lot. And I really saw it when I came to Quebec because of these WOTP programs. I don't want to slam them because they work for some kids, but the kids that get put in there are often behavioral. There's no intellectual reason for them to be in there, but because they failed 2 years in a row, guess what? Trauma mimics ADHD. The kid can't sit and think, and these kids probably are pissed off. I'd be pissed off too if my parents couldn't keep me. And I get moved around, and we'll talk more about that in a second. But I think as educators and social workers, we need to look closer at trauma, and I'm glad to see that more schools are introducing kind of an awareness of trauma with youth, because these kind of programs pull kids off track and it's almost impossible. In fact, there was no kid in my study who had been in WTP. And then I'll talk about it in a minute, but Goyette's most recent study had it, and it's very interesting. Living instability equals school disruptions. 100% of the kids noted disruptions in their educational progression because of being moved. From 13 to 17, I was in 9 different schools. Read this quote. My last home was when I was 17. You just put yourself in a bag, quite literally, they move in garbage bags, by the way. You move homes, you move schools. So not only is your education disrupted, but your friendships, your relationship with your teachers, your relationship with your mentors, gone. 9 times from 13 to 17. How do you form attachments when you already have you come with attachment disorders? Average number of moves per youth. This is a statistic in the Goyette study. 5.25. 14%, 10 or more moves. It's kind of shocking. The other thing that comes with these moves that other studies have pointed out is the fact that the lag in the administrative lag, right? You get there and we don't have anything on you because your school hasn't sent it to us yet. So where were you? Well, I was in grade 10 doing da 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 da. Oh, where you go? We're gonna put you back, and there's this cycle of repetition, right? I'm gonna do that same assignment again, and there's no completion. Imagine in Quebec, like if you get moved in the 3rd semester in Quebec, where everything's 60%, forget about it. It's over. You're done. You're not getting your credit for that year. So guess where you're going next year? Right back to the beginning. So these are things that are really important to think about. Alternative education placements limit educational opportunities and advancement. I went through a few alternate schools while I was transitioning back from different placements. I was way behind. So it was hard to keep up with my peers. I couldn't have kept up if it wasn't for getting extra support, which the foster parent paid for because the program wouldn't cover it. I changed high schools because of DYP in grade 9. It was so far, I couldn't go to my regular school. I was in small schools that were only a couple hours a day. You can see how only getting education for 2 hours a day, you're not going to get very far very fast. So that on top of the WOTP, and I was very interested in WTP because I actually worked in it. I had no idea. I thought it was like the alts in BC. So I'm working with these kids thinking I'm getting them further along, only to realize they're not getting a high school diploma, which is absolute insanity. Why not give them credit for what they can do? If this kid can do English 11 because she can write poetry like nobody's business, give her poetry, give her English 11. But that's not the case. Once you're in WTP, if you don't know about this, you should find out. It's you leave. You get a leaving certificate, which means you leave with 0 credits. Even though you were there doing the work. It's mind-blowing to me. We don't do that in BC. The Goyette's most recent that just came out last week, he looked at that and he said 20% of the participants in his study were in those kinds of programs. You wonder why they're not in training, why they're not in, right? Think about that. I think as educators in Quebec, we need to take a real close look at who's going in those programs. Findings. So these were the barriers that were identified. A lack of familiar supports or role models. I was the first one in my family to go to CEGEP. That was like 90% of the people that I interviewed. Absence of exposure to CEGEP. I didn't visualize myself there. When I did the application and had to go for an interview, that was my only time on a CEGEP campus. Navigating a new and complex system. Trying to figure out how to apply for loans, get help with my learning. I didn't even know there was tutors until I was in my 2nd year. Financial implications. I didn't know I would have to buy all my books in the first week. That wasn't a thing I had to do in high school. It cost me almost $1,000. This was a nursing student, so that's a legit cost. Living in transition. I'd have to go back to the group home right after my classes ended. How do you explain that to your teacher and friends? 5 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna move quick. Okay, findings. Identifying support. Here, we're gonna find some good stuff. Going the extra mile. I think Denberg talked about that. It's one person. It takes one person to make a difference in their lives, and it genuinely is one person. The one young man talked about his business teacher who just had said, you know, if you ever need anything, ask me, I'm here. I'll connect you. Thank God he did, because he was homeless at the time. He took them to our residence manager. Our residence manager got him into our residence and got him a job on campus, and he was set. But we also need to know what each other are doing, right? And it comes down to community resources, awareness of access before getting to CEGEP. We need a handoff, right? We need you to go, this is Sarah. Sarah, this is Stephanie. Stephanie will works at CEGEP. Oh, yeah, okay. We need the human connection. We can't just go to CEGEP. Good luck with that, right? Having a support network, having someone who believes in you. Again, even one person. Having a goal and purpose. I mean, I see this all the time in CEGEP. Anybody who, I see this now with all the youth. If they don't know what they're doing there, God help. Well, hey, God help you, the person who has to teach them. Because they don't know why they're there, so it's meaningless. They're just, you know. you know, if you don't know why you're there and have a goal and a purpose, which all of these kids did, even if it was just to prove somebody wrong, that's a big motivator, by the way. Having a growth mindset. They didn't say this, but we saw it when we coded the data. The language they were using was incredibly, I should have printed it out, the coding, because it was way up here. The kinds of things they were saying about, I'm gonna persevere, I'm gonna keep going, you know, despite everything, this is not gonna stop me, I won't be who they define me to be. The language was very filled with growth mindset language. So this was the results of our research project. I got like 3 minutes, 1 minute.
3 minutes.
3 minutes, 16 recommendations. They're here if you wanna, if anybody wants to see them closer. So again, these came out of the voices of the youth. My paper, which is 65 pages, which will be published soon, is largely filled with the language of the youth. I wanted it to be their voices because all the other data never quotes them. And I agree with you. It's gotta be quantitative and qualitative, but I wanted their voice to lead this thing because they tell me all the time when I work with them, it's gotta be by us and for us. And that's what I'm doing with Patricia becomes very important. So I'll let you look at that. I'm gonna jump ahead because I want to talk about where we are now in the last couple of minutes. John Abbott is actually implementing these recommendations right now. I took it to my deans and I said, we need to do this. Nobody else is doing it. Why don't we be the ones who do it? And then we explain to other people how we did it so that they can do it too. So here we are. So we have started prioritizing youth. We've raised awareness on campus. We're building relationships with youth and their support earlier, collaborating with post-secondary, Patricia, collaborate with external organizations. So what are we doing? I started a youth advisory group, youth and care advisory group. We have deans on that. We have youth on that. We have faculty on that. We have our housing manager on that. We have counseling on it. Within our first meeting, because this is a question to ask yourselves, what can I do in my position? And I think that's huge. Or who do I know? Right? So we sat at the table and I said, I don't want you guys to do anything and don't get overwhelmed, but what could you do right now that could change if the kids were here? Counseling. Well, we could probably raise them to the top, like, so there's not a 2-week wait time. We could do that. We could put a box on our thing and they could self-identify as being youth in care to the top. They see them the next day instead of in 2 weeks. Cool. Like you. Okay, what about housing? She said, well, we can put a box on our housing application that says youth in care and then right to the top. So in one meeting, we did all that. And it happened, and it was at the end of last year, and now we have a youth in care who did self-identify, who did get raised to the top and is up. Kind of cool, right?
That's
One person. Doesn't matter because that word will spread and we're spreading it. Okay, lots of other things. We have guest speakers on campus. We'll have them again. The resilience film, Dawson, Alyssa, if you don't know Elisa, you should have her to your school or have her to share her film with you. She's working on another project right now. She's amazing. It's called, her production company is called Production Oracle, and she made a film called Resilience. It's amazing. Anyway, I'm now onto a PIM grant with McGill, which is Patricia, yay. So we are taking it one step further. We are actually going out into community to target youth in care based on the things they said they wish they had had. We developed a four module system where the first 2, we go to them. We talk about, we do some like passion and purpose and finding a career path that makes sense to you. We talk about financial, like how can I pay for my education? That's good. And we're doing it. We've already had our first 2 sessions. It's been hugely, we're doing pre-post questionnaire. They're loving it. We have more booked for moving forward. The last 2 sessions are on a CEGEP campus and the other is on a McGill campus. I want to add that even to get them on campus earlier, I asked theater, I want to end with this story actually, because this third we'll talk about in a second. I sent an email to our theater, one of our theater department heads and said, hey, can you talk to your theater department group about maybe offering free tickets to foster families so that they could come and see. I mean, we have a beautiful theater on John Abbott. If you've never come, you should come. We have a lot of great shows this year. And then I didn't hear from her. I thought, oh God, I was like, I thought she was one of us. And then I was walking down the hall and there she was, and she's like, hey, I saw your thing. And yeah, and then she's like, tell me more about this. And I said, well, this is what I want to do. What if we could get the kids on campus with their foster parents or their group home, support, and they could choose to see a film like, or one of our plays or sporting events, which I got to deal with those guys separately. And I said, could you talk to your group could you just like bring it forward as a possibility? And she goes like this, no. And I was like, oh, God. And she goes, consider it done, right? Consider it done. And I think that to me is the message. And it really is about, like, if you're interested in knowing more about what we're doing at Abbott, if you want to be part of it, if you have more questions, anything, reach out to me, because, you know, when Denmark Park talked about like your passion and what you love, like I love teaching and I love building online courses and I have my master's ed tech and all these things, but what really fills my cup are these kids. And it's my mission. I keep telling my deans, I'm not leaving until I've done something here. So, and I'm close to retirement, so I need to get her done. Anyway, so thank you for your time. Thank you for letting me go over. We have 4 minutes for questions. 4 minutes, if anyone has questions. Yeah. Can you tell me your name? Cause I'm like,
Philippe Gagné, I teach French at Vanier College.
okay.
And I see that Vanier is not in your list, Dawson is there anything that?
I'm looking for somebody to connect with at Vanier.
Yes.
All right.
I am, Vanier is very big on my list, because in fact, when you look at Batshaw, where the youth go, I just got some data on that, because I wanted to, again, nobody really tracks them, but if I go to the foundation money and where the funding goes, right, some of the bursaries and stuff, Dawson is number 1, Vanier is number 2, and we are actually 3rd, but we're far out.
Because I have a question rapidly, I send my French as a second language students in different places, from a course from Maria Kopica from your college.
Yes.
And we send them in Maison des Jeunes, where a couple of
Okay.
young people live.
Yeah.
Together with the technician in education spécialisée and so on.
Yeah.
So when my students get there, they discover this
Other worlds.
this world.
Mm.
And it's great. I sent Muslim students that don't have
No,
much contacts with Quebecers in general.
right,
Nothing with these students.
Yeah.
And the same from these
Yeah.
microphones in that Maison des Jeunes.
mm,
And their relation was very interesting, very
Yeah.
pertinent.
it's exposure, right? It's communicating, it's knowing that they exist. Like when I presented it to the college, like people, like I had people email me privately saying, I don't know what that means. Ethan can.
Yeah, so
Which again, it's not their fault. I have no judgments. You just managed to live your life never having experienced that, but like, good for you for asking the question, you know? Yes.
I used to sit on the board of directors for Ontario Children's Aid,
Ah, yes,
and so
I'm a children's aid baby.
what my question is this, because, and I'm not sure with the DP because I'm more familiar with the
Yeah,
Ontario
yeah.
system, but there was a lot of background work that was done to connect students, and there's actually a professor, she's a professor, anyway, I think Western wise, but anyway, that was in care as well.
Mm.
And that was part of our children's aid, it was the simple one.
Mm.
Anyway, the question I have is, have you made connections with the DPG?
Oh,
So
yeah.
that they're aware and that they can,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word, funnel?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm working very closely with Batshaw, so Batshaw is really our region, they're the
Okay.
ones that are responsible, and in fact, I mean, the French systems are doing way better than us.
Mm.
As
Okay.
far as what they have in place for, like, further out, they have some very cool programs that we just don't have here, so, but yes, Batshaw, they come, we've done tours, we continue to build relationship with them.
Yeah.
Patricia and I are doing our 4 sessions with them, Care Jeunesse, Air Ouvert, pardon my French, my French is terrible, my daughter tells me all the time about my R's, and my mouth doesn't wanna do it.
Yeah, I just wanna flag that there are a lot of kids in the regions that are
Mm.
English speakers. That are really struggling with being taken out of their communities and go to
100%.
Batshaw or to go.
Yes.
Or just, you know,
Indigenous youth as well, right, they closed that, and so they're all here and so displaced, yeah,
yeah.
Great presentation,
thank you.
lots to talk to you about.
Okay.
So I know this is, I mean, you're looking at kids, it'll be a quick question. I know you're looking at kids on campus in CEGEP, and it sounds like they're primarily within Montreal
Mhm.
area. I don't know if this is planned, but one thing that could potentially really enrich the broader view of kids in care and the barriers they're facing to actually enter CEGEP would be to go out to these regions, like, I was in the SBZ, you know, a lot of the kids are still with their families, but the DPG is involved.
Right.
And a lot of those kids, CEGEP is like, there's no CEGEP there, the
100%.
closest one is Sherbrooke, so. Something like that where you could connect in the communities to talk with kids who are in care there and like what their views are of CEGEP and could they go, and the WOTP program, like the principal and I in the region butted heads a little bit this summer.
Yeah, and the intention of all of this, so I wanna qualify, so again, I'm one person doing, like, I
Of
teach.
course, yeah.
I am the pathways coordinator, so I coordinate all of the Trump Deck programs, and I'm doing this. So, and so it's hard, but,
Of course, yeah.
but the intention behind what I'm doing, like, which is why I wanna publish the paper and get this out there as much as I can, but also what Patricia and I are doing, the intention with these 4 sessions that we have the grant for over the next 2 years is to pass them off to anybody who wants them. So it's not even just like, it has to be run by CEGEP. These 4 sessions could be run at Love Quebec, they could be run Care Jeunesse. Anybody could pick up these 4 modules and run them with kids in order to break down those barriers that, like, yes, higher ed is possible for you. And it's really designed in such a way that even if they miss the first session and they come to the second, we've designed these modules so that they can catch up with a worker at Love and then jump into 2 or. So that's the mission. So those will be readily made available once we've perfected them by our 2nd year.
I have
We're at
to intervene as moderator, and it's 12:02. You guys are autonomous, you can decide to stay or to go have lunch. So, I mean, session is officially over, but, Stephanie, do you want, if people still have questions and wanna ask
Oh,
them
that's
to you
right.
now?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, you can speak.
We've got more questions.
Yeah.
Yes, so, you talked about university is possible or higher education is possible, but I can't help but think about the primary speakers and learning everything is that reasonable. Okay, it's possible.
Yes.
You can help me get there, but why should I go there?
Well, and I think
About that meaningfulness, how do you build that into the work that you're doing?
it's really important. It is a part of sort of like that first conversation, just to know that it exists and what kinds of education you can get. And again, just because she's McGill and I'm Abbott, we really are stressing, like, this is not about McGill or Abbott. If a kid discovers that a trades program is where they're not, we'll connect them. If Vanier's animal tech program is what they want, we now know. Now we got somebody on the inside.
We'll talk to Finn.
Yeah, but so our model is not to, listen, as a foster parent, my model always was, as long as you are moving forward in at least 3 areas of your life. Okay, so you have a financial area, if you wanna work. You wanna go to the gym, take care of your body, because that transfers to the mind, 100%. You wanna do counseling, you wanna look at your spiritual being, you know, sure. You wanna go and deal with your educational stuff, go deal with that. But you have to be moving forward in at least 3 areas of your life. That was my approach. And that's kind of what we're trying to build here. You know what? You are a great person. Guess what? You say you're passionate about this. Have you ever thought about this? Have you ever thought about, so we actually do the career cruising questionnaire with them for free. And it just plants seeds. And, you know, we get them to go out and ask questions, you know. Ask, you know, this person over here that you see every day, what their trajectory was. How did they get to where they were going? You know, so it's getting them to just even think about it. And then our second session is, okay, so now you've thought about it, you have some possibilities in mind, nobody's making you do it, you know, but how much would that cost? So we're gonna find out, okay, I would like Vanier has this program, how much would it cost for books? How much would it cost for this? How much would housing cost? Let's talk about that. And then they're gonna go, oh, and then we're gonna do the FAE simulator. So we're gonna show them how much money they could get if they apply. Because as youth in care, former, current, they qualify for more than people living with their parents.
So very concrete.
Yes, very concrete.
Very hands-on, and that's
Very
why we go there first.
Yeah, that's why you go there.
No, and I just said it was very sorry.
No, take it, go for it.
We also go with 2 students who
Yes,
have lived
That's,
experience.
and they're running it.
Because that thing is what we say, which not too important. When students,
Yeah.
it's with experience, say.
That was very critical. So that's, I should have said that. Thank you for reminding us. Yeah, they refuse. So there is that always in the program. And we wanna get more and more youth. Yes. Right, and that is very important to our model, is that they are leading it, like, we're guiding them in the beginning, obviously, they've never done this kind of stuff. Either of them, but already they're phenomenal. And they get in there and they're like the youth that are coming love them. Yeah, and they're like, we could just. Yeah, actually, the last session I sat back, I talked to the other guy more than I did. I saw them in. Yeah, it's great, it's great. Yes, because they need to know, and there was a bit of irony there too, because one of the girls who's volunteering with us, who's at my CEGEP right now, had just that day been accepted to Sherbrooke's education program. So she was able to share, and, you know, it's just cool, it's cool. Yeah.
The generosity from the speaker is really things talking about. Even in their capacity to look forward and feel that they give us a show.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Or other questions for that, for Tom? So,
I have one quick question, it's just a resource question. So when you talk about over-representation, something that, you know, I'm sensitive to, so I work with all the youth sectors, K-11 schools, right, sector. And I guess, something that we hear a lot about is that, you know, if I send my kid, for example, uncapped to school,
right,
nobody's gonna call it division to investigate.
right,
But if I'm a black mother and I send my child to
100%.
school, there's a way bigger chance that somebody is going to flag an division.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if in your work, have you encountered any resources that we could use to help sort of raise awareness around when it's actually appropriate?
Well, if you go to the website, the DPJ has a pretty nice layout of like, when should I call, so they have a nice, like, it's pretty good, and they would be the ones to talk to about that, and
Does it call people out on unconscious bias or not necessarily?
I think they're getting better at that. Yeah,
ACDP and also there's a lot of they overuse the program. Reducing stigmatization and black community. Yeah, I think so.
So Tanya, and maybe
was there somebody else?
I was curious if you do any work with employment organizations. I used to work with as an employment counselor, and way back there were programs that were like the only programs that recognized the 18 to 25 aging out of care population, and a lot of that got restructured. I think there's still some programs that kind of meet halfway, but
really?
they're not able to do to the extent. A lot of it was you had to be receiving social assistance.
Right.
But there are people in that network
Right.
that I believe certain CEGEPs as well, they kept pushing us on still want to do a lot of that work and want to, because they receive, you know, the 18 to 25.
Right, that's interesting, I wonder if Care Jeunesse is connected with them, that's a.
For sure.
And, yeah, but Care Jeunesse would be huge, because they've also like, yeah, they're in the midst of some really big changes, so that would be really critical. They just secured a location at, the Verdun Metro. So in the building there, it's brand new, just, I was at their AGM last week. And they've secured a location, and they are now recognized as, not-for-profit, and so they're gonna be able to do so much more than they've been able to do kind of off of Varda's, you know, come and set up camp over here. So I would think that Care Jeunesse would be perfect for that, because they're dealing with the ones who've aged out. But I would love for you to, I'm gonna give you my card.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I think that's a really important consideration. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And I have my card, and I'll give it to you right now. Send me a job, right?